Joining me today on my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters, is Ryan Halsey. Ryan is a drummer and a producer and an engineer. He was picked by Radio 1 Huw Stephens to join the Think Big project and to play O2 arenas and venues alongside Rita and Tinchy Strider, and then he decided to join an alternative band, The Gravity Drive, who you may have heard of, my band, and he has played at Glastonbury Festival. His contributions to our records have been played on Radio 2, Six Music, and applauded in MOJO Magazine. He's worked with Chris Potter, Pete Schweer, and lots of big producers. And so I'm talking to Ryan today. He's also my best friend. I was his best man, so hopefully this is an intimate conversation, which we thought would be interesting, just to get the drummer's perspective across in terms of how a drummer thinks of songwriting, and to get that idea. So this is the conversation today, episode 3 or 4, can't remember which one we're going for, but it will say on the front of the podcast. My special guest is Ryan Halsey. And also just to alert you guys and girls to my book, The Songwriter's Handbook, which is now available on Amazon and on Kindle, where you can buy the book, and there's 52 ideas and themes to think about as a songwriter. You could pick one a week or just flick through, and each theme I asked you questions to think about, to investigate in your own imagination, which might become the seed and spark of a new song idea. So please check that out. Thanks to anyone who subscribes. But for now, please enjoy episode 3 or 4, I can't remember which one we're going to go for, with my friend and drummer Ryan Halsey. Thanks for listening. Joining me today on my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters, is Ryan Halsey. Ryan is a drummer and a producer, and he's also my best friend. And I wanted to get him on here to talk to him about his career in music, and also from the point of view of working with songwriters, because we've spoken to lots of songwriters, but it's one thing being in a band for a long time with songwriters and working with songwriters too. So as well as his career and his journey, I'm going to talk to him about his unique perspective as being in the band, also adding to writing himself, but just kind of that relationship, the kind of view from the inside, if you like. Hi Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm all right, thank you.
We're at rainy West Dorset at the moment.
Yeah, it was sunny.
And now it's not.
Alas, no.
Congratulations, first of all, on becoming a dad. We've just welcomed Theo into the world, and so you and Emily have just got a new baby boy, which is amazing, and he's beautiful. So congratulations on becoming a dad.
Well, that's kind of you.
How are you finding that?
Yeah, it's a shift. A shift, but it's like equal parts chaos and simplicity, all in one.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I first came across you when I read about you in a local paper as this local drummer who had been handpicked by Huw Stephens on Radio 1 to be part of a project called Big Think, Huw had basically, as I understand it, selected musicians that had uploaded a video of them playing, formed a band, and then you went round O2 arenas and venues playing alongside Tinchy Strider, Rita, the Noisettes. So that's the first time I kind of came across you, and I have to say, from sort of reading that someone, I guess I recognised that you're a bit of a self-starter when I first read that article, that you'd kind of done it yourself, made this video, got selected. So to me, that's like, okay, I'm impressed by this guy. So tell me about that experience of when you got the email through from Huw Stephens, sort of Radio 1 or whatever, how did that feel?
I think interestingly with that, at the time, I actually wanted to shoot some videos, just coming up with some drum parts for like electronic kind of dubstep tracks, which are pretty popular at the time. And actually I do recall a step before that, I was raising funds to try and produce it and get like a crew together to make it look nice and sound nice. And I do believe that actually you helped.
I did.
But you didn't know me at that point at all.
No.
You just saw a local musician wanting to make something, and you kindly saw that, that was something that you wanted to support, which was great. But yeah, timing wise, I think we were almost finished on like the first draft of like one of the songs.
Yeah.
And then I somehow stumbled across the O2 project online.
Yeah.
And it was literally just the timelines worked, where it's like I've got a first edit that's like in really bad quality, but it's just enough to kind of go,
yeah.
this is me trying to do something.
So how old are you at that point?
That's actually hard to guess exactly, but early 20s, I guess.
So that's quite a thing to be like in your early 20s, to be handpicked by Huw Stephens, who obviously is like at the time was the man for like new music and picking people out.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Huw
Does that
Stephens,
give you validation in terms of what you were doing as a drummer, or wanting to be in music?
I suppose it definitely felt like a real sense of, you know, because before that I'd always dreamed of wanting to be on bigger stages and, you know, like looking at Glastonbury on TV and thinking like I really would like that experience. Yeah, I guess having his face as being a person that was involved in putting together all these individuals, and at the time, you know, he was on like Radio 1, sort of prime time, being the introducing sort of
BBC introducing guy,
advocate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, it's, you know, it felt like definitely a
blessing of some type, I guess.
Some kind of link to a dream in my head.
Yeah.
And it felt like, oh, okay, this is actually maybe a step through the door. Actually,
but you studied at, was it BIM you studied at, or?
Yeah, it was called Drum Tech at the time.
Yeah.
But it then.
So had you done drum tech before that Huw Stephens experience, or was it afterwards you did drum tech?
Yeah, I did drum tech first.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say it was probably a year or two maybe
after that.
After coming back.
So you, at what point or why did you decide to be a drummer? Like, you know, without giving us like a long history, what was the moment where you kind of thought, I want to drum? Was it like someone in the family or watching a drummer? Like, what made you want to be a drummer?
It certainly wasn't like a instinctual calling from day one. And I think before drums, I tried a bit of everything.
Musically?
Just
what do you mean,
even
like different
outside
jobs?
of music.
Okay, cool.
You know, just like different hobbies.
Okay.
And it would always be like a 3-month stint, and then I just lose interest.
Like, what hobbies did you try?
I did all sorts of stuff, like gymnastics.
Did you?
Like football. It was quite almost more sports based.
Oh, was it?
Before.
Okay. What was your favourite sports based hobby?
Weirdly, quite like badminton.
Really?
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to take you down to the netting, and we're going to have to have a go at badminton.
Because you can
badminton.
really like lay into it. And then all of a sudden it just glides.
Right, we're going to have a game of badminton next week.
It's
that's happening.
You can go full aggression, but it still just floats.
Well, that's quite interesting.
It's quite an
isn't that quite an interesting parallel to drumming?
Yeah,
full
I guess
aggression
so.
and floating.
Yeah, quite an interesting dual.
So I never knew
dynamic.
that you're a bit of a badminton player. That's quite cool.
Yeah, I used to be like all over that before music in a way.
So why music then? So like, what was the point of?
I mean, drums in particular.
Why did you put down the shuttlecock and pick up the drumsticks?
I mean, it was almost just a friend of mine literally had a drum kit at his house.
Right. Okay.
And I've got this memory of going there, and he was like big into sort of metal, quite heavy styles of playing. So he had this like double bass pedal that allows him to sound like he's got 2 bass drums rather than 1.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I was just really enamored by the fact there was a pedal over one side.
Yeah.
Out in the middle of nowhere, yet it was hitting a drum that was.
So almost like the mechanics of it.
Yeah, there was something mechanical about this.
Because you are quite
device.
engineering, aren't you?
Yeah, I've got a weird like.
You're like a bit of a gadget and a bit.
I like to know how things work.
Yeah. So from that point, then you sort of start getting drum lessons. Is that what you do?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it was just the old sort of classic, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found a new thing I want to do after the list.
I bet your parents were delighted. Were they happy about it? Because you get that cliche that the parents are like, Christ, my son's got
I
a
don't
drum.
know. I don't know if they. I guess they probably, if I'm at the place I'm at now, I'd imagine they were probably like, okay, it's just another thing for, you know, this is this 6 monthly.
Right, okay.
Because I was pretty like track record of like 6 months of anything, and then I'd
sort of give
want something else to try.
Okay.
But yeah,
But they've been like incredibly from the outside. I mean, you've got a room in their house where you don't live anymore, where you teach drums. I mean, like they used to, when we'd play early gigs in the band, they'd be there carrying your gear. It seems to me like
yeah,
you've been really supported by your parents.
yeah. I think it was, I guess it's like most parents. You're like, I really want a drum kit.
Yeah.
And you're like, do you want to just give it a few months to
See how you
see
go.
if before we pull the trigger on this, that
Yeah.
you're going to stick with it?
Yeah.
And then obviously, I think it was probably like 9 months later. I'm like,
I'm into it.
I want a drum kit.
Must be nice for them to see that you. Well, so how old are you at that point? Like.
I think probably 14.
Okay,
So I guess kind of late.
How old are you
compared
now?
to most. 33.
So you've been doing it enough time for them to know that they made a good investment as a drummer.
I think so.
Like badminton wouldn't have maybe gone the distance if
Yeah.
county player could have been good, but like may not have got to
No.
may have got to the Olympics.
No. And also, I think probably at that age is, where like most people, you find your own
groove.
identity in music
Yeah.
and what you listen to,
Yeah.
and you've got people around you growing up that are like, there's bands that are just
forming and stuff.
there's
like
a
that.
culture.
That's
in
quite a nice
school
thing,
and
isn't it? That's that early sort of teenage thing where you're in bands and there's a bit of a scene, and some people stick at it, some people don't. But like that, and that is quite an exciting part of becoming a musician. I think that element. But, gigs down the halls, parents there, all that kind of like friends there, girls you fancy at school. It all becomes like a bit of a thing where you're like a drummer or a musician now. It's a different thing.
Yeah, and I definitely did the sort of thing of like I took lessons in the initial bit for about 6 months, and then as you said, girls are interesting.
Do you know I had a
so
gig.
you end up sort of going, oh sorry, I couldn't come because I forgot, and
What do you mean? Like you were drumming instead?
no, I didn't go to the lessons.
Oh, because of girls.
Yeah.
So you had a moment where girls distracted you from drums.
From lessons.
So I had this thing where like we had a really good music teacher at our school, Colin New, who went on to be a Hampshire music government person, but he was great because he would like let us use the music room. And so there's a gig in like year 7 where we'd played in front of like assemblies and parents. Then there was like a kind of Friday night gig with like the whole school invited, and you're like going, this is either like this choice to be in a band and put yourself in front of the whole school is either going to be bullying for the next 5 years, or it's going to be all right. And my band were quite good at the time because the musicians were better than I was, and I was singing. But like, I remember kind of finishing the gig, and then all the cool girls kind of running towards we were, and me going, "Oh, there's a change." And they wouldn't have done this yesterday. But
you can, like, you are like when you do like your first sort of school show. Before that, you're one person.
Yeah,
and then as soon as people see you in that, they're like, "Oh,
you're
their whole perception of you changes." It's
quite funny that. But actually, you come across something quite important there, of like deciding you're going to be a artist or a musician or a drummer, and actually coming out of those teenage years and going, "No, I'm gonna have a crack at this." Is I was speaking to someone yesterday actually for the podcast who was saying there's a change where you go from teenage to 20s where you're like, I'm going to go for this, and there's also a point when you go from 20s to 30s where you're still doing it, and friends around are mortgaging and families and the mad ones of us are going, I'm making art, and that's important to us. But when you go from that point of teenage to 20s, and when you decided to kind of commit to it being more than a hobby, was that kind of a anxiety period, or how did you know that you were on the right track for you?
Yeah, I mean, what's kind of, I don't know, what I find interesting was it was just generally something I did every day.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a sense of, I am this, I want to become this. It's like,
I am doing this every day.
I'd just come home from school and like, right, let's put that CD on.
And do that.
And I guess the naivety when you're a less experienced player is you're just going on an instinct of thinking that you're doing it. And now probably if I like listen to stuff now, I'd be like, no, I was nowhere near.
But
But
the
is
drive
it as
was
an
there.
innocence
Yeah.
to like
Well,
ignorance is bliss with
Yeah,
it?
but the
you
drive
know?
was there, right? To go home every
Well,
day and do it. So.
I just
But when you take
did
that
it every day. It wasn't really
choice,
it was just like
I had to do it every day.
I'm not even sure it's had to. Just like okay,
This is what I do.
I got something out of doing it every day.
But when you
It brought
turn
me
that
joy
from
every
a
day.
hobby and enjoyment into like a kind of finance earner incentive money kind of, when it comes down to that, when you know, did you know, sod it, I'm going to have a go at this?
I think what it was like, when you get to like the end of GCSEs and like A levels, and the school were very much like giving you quite a career talk all the time, or they're trying to guide you in a direction. Like, if you need to go to uni, you need a degree, you need this to have it. It's quite like they've got I don't know what it's like now, but they had a message of, if you want to be successful, you need to get a degree in something, etc.
Yeah.
And then I did A levels because there was a good music course, which I actually quite enjoyed.
Yeah.
But B, I didn't really know what else to do outside of that.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I just worked a job in essentially a metal factory, not heavy metal,
But
literally
okay.
very repetitive tasks.
Yeah.
But you could have music on
Okay.
all the time. But after like a year, it's like, what am I doing?
Okay. So you had that thing of realizing I can't do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I'm just clocking in with the same routine.
Yeah.
What is this?
So the idea is to risk that comfort of routine to actually go for something else.
Well, it was just kind of like, drumming was the one thing I sat down every day and did.
Yeah. Okay.
When I didn't have to choose to do that,
Yeah.
I just did it.
Yeah.
So, and I also was aware at that point that generally being self-taught for 95% of the time, I felt like there was a threshold to my ability back then.
Yeah.
Where I needed someone to kind of open some doors and show me different ways of.
Hence drum tech kind of.
Yeah. And also my musical taste was quite narrow.
Which was metal, right?
Heavy rock metal. Yeah. It was kind of like
technically insane metal. That kind of level of ability is like.
Yeah, and weirdly, I didn't ever play like that.
Okay.
I loved at the time loved all the aggression and the sort of technicality and.
So what kind of groups you listen to when you talk about
that? So I guess bands like Killswitch Engage, Machine Head, but also some more like Funeral for a Friend. Also, I think being a teenager in Bridport, there was quite a.
Emo.
Wasn't quite as heavy, but it's a bit more like the post-hardcore.
Yeah.
Shoegazy.
Yeah.
There was there was a generation above me that were doing a lot of that.
Okay.
So I saw a lot of that stuff as well.
So when you sort of, after drum tech and you've done that, and then you get onto Huw Stephens, is that choice of like making drumming your choice as a career? And was that supported by loved ones and family and friends? Were you out on a bit of a limb?
I guess I wouldn't say they were resistant.
Okay.
Anywhere around. I guess it's hard because none of them have really, my parents have always worked for someone else.
Yeah.
And say like my dad in particular worked for the council.
Yeah.
Pretty much his whole life just doing the same thing for.
Yeah.
30 years,
which is also extraordinary in its own way.
I very quickly after coming back from drum tech, it was like I can't do that.
Yeah.
Or I sort of felt like I was being lazy in those scenarios because I just didn't really want to do it.
Okay, that's an interesting thing to notice about yourself.
Yeah. Like I would lean on being lazy. just through lack of like not wanting to.
Yeah.
Whereas it's like everything requires work, I guess. But
Yeah.
when it's like, okay, this is the thing I want to do, then it's like
Different thing. It brings out a different character, doesn't it? A different. You're not lazy then. You're like actually really hardworking and want something.
engaged and
Engaged.
yeah, this is it. But yeah, I think, you know, I mean, my wife, it's like we met, I don't know, probably about a year before I left
Okay.
to go to London. So it
Yeah.
was a bit like, yep, great, we're together, but by the way, I'm still doing this. And to be fair, she supported that decision.
That's a vitally important thing to have someone if you're going to team up with someone in life and go the distance that supports and understands, even if they're not. I mean, to be fair, Emily's a performer herself in kind of pantomime and sort of musicals, so she does understand it. But like, that is. I'm not asking you to explore your relationship on a podcast, but I think it is very interesting to have someone who understands and is cool.
No, I acknowledge that that's like, there's times where my mindset is distracted and lost in something in my imagination or in my mind, and she just has to sort of
deal with
it. Yeah, and it's like I completely understand that she's very patient and like at the start of our relationship, it's like,
well, you're not thing is, I think what I'm trying to say is the root of an artist or musician is not more special than what you might regard a kind of normal life, but the life of a musician artist is not normal. You're coming home late. It's like you're there in the daytime, but you're going out late at night. It's a different thing for people to live with, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it comes, I guess you could say a cost, but I mean, I guess in the sense of like normal things that most people would do if they work 9 to 5 and they go out on the weekends.
That's gone.
It's like, no, that's
my chief time to do you know, it took me like, I don't know if I've still got this point across to people. It's like, that's my Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
Friday is like
prime time working.
So it's kind of you are definitely a bit of an island in that way. Yeah. So we go from that amazing experience of kind of being plucked by Huw Stephens and doing that, and then you find yourself pretty quickly joining the Gravity Drive. Pretty quickly after that, maybe a few years after that.
I don't think it wasn't
long, was it?
Long, no, because obviously you saw the newspaper article.
Yeah, I basically noted it down as like, right. We were Ava and I were both in a different band at the time, and that kind of fell apart. But I was like, well, he has the same ambition and drive because he's gone out and funded these videos to make them quality. And he's fundraised that to make videos. They look really good, and he's put them to this Huw Stephens thing. He's been picked by, and he's done it all from himself. So like, I remember being impressed by going, that's the kind of person that I should be in a band with, because he makes stuff happen, something out of nothing. It's that's the guy that is the kind of right person to be in a group with. So when it came around to sort of doing another band or forming the Gravity Drive outside of the two of us being the kind of studio thing, you were the first person to get in touch. And what's been great is that it's been that way ever since. And so,
I mean, what is kind of interesting as well was like, I think I was aware of you,
right,
locally, but I was also aware that you had that band that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So I guess in some weird parallel, it was like, okay, that would be a person I'd like to play with more, because I appreciated the way that you played was like unusual for a singer-songwriter.
Okay.
Or it appealed to probably the rhythmic side of things appealed to me.
Okay.
Because music I listen to is more.
See, this is quite interesting, and I appreciate to the podcast listeners, this might be a touch indulgent, but like, it's kind of interesting sometimes to hear like what is. Because my first lessons on guitar were flamenco.
Yeah.
And
my
uncle
sense.
Peter taught me flamenco. So I think those first few lessons, as is true of any musician, I think, if you really break down what impacts your playing, same way if you listen to metal at that stage, that stuff's like really small stuff, which is quite big in the end. You know, just those first few flamenco lessons were like, okay, because flamenco is all about rhythm, right? So it's a different way of thinking rather than strumming is a kind of big open strum thing. The flamenco thing is like more passion or kind of aggression or kind of
Just textured, isn't it?
textured, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've been in the Gravity Drive since 2012, I
I'm
think.
glad you know that because
And so
I
that's
don't, but
I mean, that's a lifetime, really, to be in a band. There's major bands who are super famous who haven't done that amount of time that we've done together. So, you know, one of the things that I'm sort of quite interested to hear about, and I'm just careful to tread this line because it could be indulgent, but I don't care. It's my podcast. But so it's
Good
like,
it
you know,
is.
what, you know, you're not a songwriter.
No.
You're a brilliant drummer, but you're also, you know, what's grown in the time we've worked together. You know, you're not just a drummer. You've become an engineer. You become someone who is you know, brilliant engineer, someone who is creating soundscapes and synths and kind of sounds. So you've grown from not just being like the drummer, you've taken on the kind of job really of engineering and being involved in a way, sort of diversifying skills and kind of
Yeah, and
being creative
interestingly,
through that way.
I mean, in like my very first band, you know, which is just school
Yeah,
school band, as it were. We used to rehearse in like a youth centre where they built like a music studio.
yeah,
But there was a guy there who was definitely quite a, you know, inspirational father figure.
yeah. Harry.
And yeah, Harry Warren is a bit of a legend in my eyes.
Yeah,
But you know, obviously we were recording demos there, and I'd see all the
yeah,
mics, the recording console.
yeah.
I didn't have a clue how any of it worked, but I think it.
Well,
I liked being in the control room rather than just playing the thing
okay,
as well.
that's cool.
So I think it was like, I'd like to figure this out. Right now, I don't understand.
so it's that again. It's that interest in how does something work.
Yeah.
So you're in a band that are song led, and you've come from
Yeah.
a metal background. I just had deja vu, man. I just had serious deja vu, which is kind of cool. You're from a metal background musically, and you come into a band which are very song led, which are kind of 3.5 minute songs with structures. And how is it to work in the? I would imagine as a musician, outside of being a songwriter, that sometimes songwriting is great because there's kind of guidance and this is where we're going and the song is a map, but sometimes it might be quite restrictive. So how do you kind of find that as a musician in your own right? How does that work for you, as just the structure of songs first of all? How is that kind of good or bad or both? What's your experience?
I suppose like songs having a structure isn't necessarily that different to say like listening to metal and things, or at least the music I enjoyed.
Yeah.
There was still
Structure.
choruses,
Yeah.
hooks, middle eights.
Yeah.
It maybe not be quite so obvious,
Right.
but I suppose the music I was drawn to had
Structure.
composition and structure.
Composition,
Yeah, it wasn't just like here's the riff for 5 minutes.
Improvisation. Yeah. Okay.
And some of that stuff I didn't click with at all.
Yeah.
So I think the structure side of it was.
You kind of were familiar with composition and structure through.
Yeah. But I suppose the thing that's quite interesting is sometimes understanding the drum's role in maybe more songwriter-based music.
Okay, let's dive into that. Let's open that up.
That's quite different.
How?
I suppose because sometimes, you know, I would have my, I guess, instinct for like parts and, oh, I could do this here, do that there.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But maybe not able to see the bigger picture at that moment of like, what do the drums actually need to provide
Right.
for a song like this?
Yeah. Okay. So is that a kind of? I mean, you are someone who's very, you know, I think songwriters can be quite sure of themselves, maybe kind of difficult, maybe sometimes, or quite kind of stuck in what they want. And I would imagine that can be quite difficult to work with sometimes. But also, you're very good at being very open and not someone who kind of like gets emotional or reactive if the part you've come up with isn't what I or the songwriter wants. You're quite good at. I mean, I suppose I would imagine
I've
it's.
built that skill, yeah.
But it used to annoy you a lot.
Um, don't know if it used to annoy me a lot, but it'd be quite disappointing
Yeah,
and quite you know, at first you're like, oh,
yeah,
be quite a like. I thought I had it there,
you're right.
you know. Whereas I think now it's a bit like, I suppose it's trying to get almost like a universal feeling between everyone.
The collaboration between the.
If like there's a, you know, if the part or an idea is like everyone's feeling the same way,
Yeah,
that's generally like, that's more powerful
yeah.
than one person just going, I feel this. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
well, that's when it comes out of songwriter or solo artist realm into band realm, right? So that the kind of like everyone has to be happy with it to kind of, or the majority have to be happy with it.
Yeah, and I mean also as well, I do think that, you know, musically, obviously my upbringing, there's certain ways that the drums interact with the other instruments.
Yeah.
That when you carry that into a realm where the instruments are very different tonally, like acoustic guitars versus big distorted electric guitars, and vocally things are a lot more soulful. And
yeah, I mean that's quite a big change, isn't it? Actually, really, to go from that background of more heavier metal stuff to like to work with different voices of instruments.
yeah, and it's definitely also, I think throughout that time, like playing in a room together, it's understanding that, oh, okay, the drums are actually quite a loud instrument.
Yeah.
And that's fine if your vocalist is
Everyone else is loud.
going full on,
Yeah.
you know, belting, and it's more about the passion of it than necessarily like the control of things.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, like all of that led to a bit more of, I had to kind of work on a sound.
Yeah.
I think playing
in the group.
Yeah.
So, do you know if I or anyone plays you or Ava plays you a new song, do you kind of, are you hearing a drum pattern? What are you listening to? And what are you hearing a pattern straight away? Like how do you react?
I think it's more like, first of all, I'm trying to get a sense of like, where is the pulse of it?
Yeah.
So where am I feeling that consistent rhythm that I'm then going to base things around?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's probably the first place. Then it's almost like...
Can I just say, I think that's a very intelligent thing to say, because I think after a while I got to the point of realising that most of the harmonies, actually, they have to say this in a kind of respectful way, actually, because it's actually, you know, in the group, the Gravity Drive, Ava's harmonies are completely unique and all about her, but it's like within the kind of pulse and certain frequencies that will lead to harmonies in the kind of organic seed of a song, in the harmonics of the chords you play and the way you play those chords, the kind of, it is definitely suggesting the pulse and the kind of way to go. I think that it's kind of in there. So to kind of find that pulse is...
Yeah, I think it's like you've got the pulses first, but then even then, when you've got that, it's trying to work out how to create, I don't know, like a box around it where it sits.
Yeah.
It's free within it, but
do you listen to like, so that's totally cool. So you get the pulse, but in terms of like the feeling of the chords or the images or the feeling of the song or the words, or if it's sad or happy or dark, or like, are you like, there's the pulse and the mechanics almost of like the kind
I
of...
think it's almost like, I would say maybe it's changed a bit more now, but I guess it would start off with like, if I have a pulse, the sort of way my brain tends to break it down is like, okay, I can divide it into these notes. So therefore, like, do I want this kind of pattern or this kind of pattern?
Okay.
Almost just trying to sort of deconstruct it a little bit.
Right.
And then trying to go back to the source of the song itself. And
so you're kind of analysing what's available to you in your toolkit of beats.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then
like filtering down into some...
Yeah.
Could this feel work? Could this feel work?
Yeah. Your progression in terms of the Gravity Drive albums, you came in halfway through us making our debut album Testament, which was quite electronic. Beats formed by Ava and the producer Paul Knight Mousiak. And your job at that point, you played live drums on Cherry Ripe, which was a single, and then it progressed to kind of us taking that sound out live. So as well as you being the drummer and sort of becoming an engineer, you kind of became, if you like, the live musical director in certain ways of having to handle, because we'd just made the decision that so many bands had like fallen apart. We were going to be like, we're going to front this, so no matter what happens,
we can just make it.
But in actual fact, you've been a member for like, you've been...
Yeah, I mean...
But in terms... I'll come back to that in a second, but one of the things that you had to handle was... These drums are electronic. I'm a live drummer, and I'm triggering the sounds that they've made on the album through my sort of other drum pad thing.
Yeah.
So you had like a massively important role live. And also what was funny, now I look back at it, is that our sound was massive on Testament, but it was basically Ava singing vocals, me playing an acoustic guitar and a voice, you playing drums, and then like a universe of sounds.
And a record. Got ideas.
Which I always kind of thought, how at the beginning of that, I was like, are we getting away with this? Until I realised, hold on a minute, Jay-Z and Snoop Dogg are just on stage with a microphone and they're playing backing tracks, so that's fine. That was my way into like, it's fine. But you were handling a lot of that stuff. So as a, how was that, taking an album which is already made, pretty much, and then finding your way into that as a live drummer?
I mean, what's interesting is like the origins of that was obviously at first you kind of had this sound on record that you'd worked to create, and then I think we were just almost doing things acoustic. I think I was just like playing a cajon, wasn't I?
You were, yeah.
And then I think I at the time spent a lot of time watching drummers using electronics in their sounds and setups, and they're like, oh yeah, I use this unit because it allows me to like play full tracks. I'm like, obviously piecing it together, thinking, you've got a record that sounds one way.
Yeah.
What we're doing is a very different version, which is nice to have that as a different option. But I'm like, I'd like to
do both.
I want to make that record something we can
play live,
produce live. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, even those drums actually, you have to interpret it, and you cannot cover all bases.
Yeah.
With the thing that makes drums groove on a record.
Yeah. It's
quite a combination of like angular things that go against each other, and it's like, as a drummer, I've got 4 limbs.
Yeah. And
I can't. And also, I guess when you're using sounds that have been mixed and produced, it's like I can emulate that and go, oh, that's got a really tight sound, so let's try and make it have that character, but also I've got to use a certain amount of sounds for a whole set.
It has to be said, I mean, like, from somebody that working with you, I mean, you took on a lot there and nailed it. So thanks for that.
Nice.
But in terms of like working with, just to bring it back to sort of the songwriting thing, because obviously it's the kind of focus of the podcast in a way. But what do you think your role is in terms of when a new song arrives?
At first, now I almost feel like I've learnt that I'm on the back foot in a way, which might sound a bit odd, but like you've lived with it
Okay.
in your head
Yeah.
and nurtured it,
Mm.
and you know a lot more than I do in the first listen.
That's a good point.
I can get a sense of like, oh, that's nice, or this is nice.
You can have subjective
but
feeling about it.
the understanding of like why everything is pieced where it is like that takes time for me to develop. So I'm trying not to just,
Are there times that you don't like in all honesty, the times where you're like, that's not for me, that song, as well as that is for me?
I think there's songs where it's a bit like I don't know what the answer is here.
So it's more of a puzzle to solve rather than yes, no, don't like it, do like it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever just kind of. I think there's songs that I am automatically more drawn to.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever kind of gone,
that shit.
I just don't like that. It is the puzzle thing, I think. It's
puzzle
like,
thing. Yeah.
I don't maybe have a musical reference in my head.
Yeah.
Sometimes to maybe go like, that's the
area.
That's the feel like.
And also you've worked with two quite strong personalities, two writers, and naturally you are you're a very powerful person actually, but in terms you're quieter than your bandmates.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. But so you've had to. So how do you, as a musician, and I know you played in different bands, but I think this is your only original band at the moment you've been in. Unless you've got a side hustle, I don't know.
Well, yeah, just kept a secret the entire time.
Yeah, but how do you deal with? Let's just cut to a chase. How do you deal with songwriters' egos and songwriters? How do you deal with that?
I think things boil over. Do you know what I mean? Like there are moments where I think, again, through experience and doing it enough times, you kind of are able to realise everyone just wants
the best.
Again, going back to the original idea of that unified sense of like, oh, this feels great.
You did actually tell me, the only time we've come close to it is when you told me something about my neck in once.
I mean, yeah, that's a weird ability I have to say things that mean...
No, you're right.
No sense, but
you're right. It's being a dick.
Like, yeah, that's, but that rarely happens to that absolute point where I'm just like, lost it.
Yeah, to be fair, there's not been much of that, but there has been like passion and kind of.
Yeah, there's heated like expression where I suppose it's just a frustration where it's like, I'm trying.
Yeah.
I want the answer. I don't know what it is. And you're just like trying to.
What are your career highlights outside of the O2 and Huw Stephens? It's got to be a career highlight because it was such a great induction. But in terms of the career being not just with the band, but what are your kind of things that you're most proud of creatively and making a record? Like your contribution to a song, what are you most kind of proud of?
I think in a way, again, it's like if the artist says, like, oh, what you've done there is like really, almost, if you get a moment where they're like, oh, I couldn't have, they couldn't have imagined that would be possible. Yeah. And I guess if you've done it through like an instinct of yourself,
then you're,
and it's like kind of grabbed them in a way that's like, whoa, didn't see that coming, but it.
Yeah, but that's.
And also, I guess when you get those moments, where ideas are coming about, I quite like trying to find the obscure angle on something a little bit.
Okay.
I think that's perhaps why sometimes maybe the songs that I get stuck with are actually the solutions are simple.
Right. Okay, that's
It's
good.
like trying to search for something a bit obscure, and it's actually
It's not. Doesn't need to be that.
the
kind
role in this song is like.
To be fair to something that I think is what, because I'm really interested in bands that like have been together a long time, and how their sound and songs change, and how the relationships change, and how roles change. But it's fair for me to say that in terms of the second album, The Wildlight, where the first album, Testament, you were like, it was kind of done apart from Cherry Ripe,
Yeah.
and you were interpreting that in a live sound. But in terms of the sound of the second record, in terms of like the drums, you took your place at the table there, and also kind of wanted to, found the studio where we were going to do that, Middle Farms Recording Studios in Devon. You're very keen on that kind of sound that was had there, so like, you started to kind of carve your own kind of like, these are the songs and stuff, but like, I'm bringing me to the table.
I definitely feel like I had an identity in that.
Yeah.
That album on the drums,
Definitely.
it's. Yeah, I mean that as a process was like great, great time. It's like to be able, like I like drums to have a sense of space.
Yeah.
Like I like the sound of a room.
Yeah.
And what the drums sound like in that room.
What tracks are you most proud of that you've added to, like, you've played on in the Gravity Drive?
I think probably Kaleidoscope, Wake at the Dawn, and Wildlight, I would say.
Can I add Hits Like a Fix to that?
Yes, to be fair.
It was quite interesting when we were mixing, and it's also fair to say that Ava's contribution to like the drum parts and her way of, she would often dance a beat.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a unique way
that is another dynamic that's, I don't know if that happens.
It's something that's
often.
Something that we do a lot, and what she does a lot in our band.
Yeah.
And also describes things like Breath of God, or like, she has a way, because she's not musical in the sense of being although she did learn to play guitar and everything when she was a kid, but she's coming from it as a sort of arranger, producer, kind of imagination sort of.
It's definitely an emotional.
But the language she used was kind of like not musical, right?
It's not literal in a language that musicians generally tend to.
But it's kind of a USP in a way.
Yeah,
because it's like, I'm a songwriter, you're a musician, and then she kind of took those things and kind of brought colour, and I always think of Fantasia.
Well, there's definitely a feeling that she's searching for, and she knows the feeling.
Groove's important to her, so that she, almost cannot stand something where she doesn't have groove.
Yeah.
It's like
groove and movement.
Almost offensive that there's not a groove.
I suppose as well that does lean in well to sometimes trying to go a bit not obscure necessarily, but trying to go a bit deeper.
Yeah.
Rhythmically to try and find something that.
But I was going to say that when Chris Potter was mixing Kaleidoscope, we arrived into this, I think it was Sugar Cane Studios in London, and you could hear it down the street being played, which was thrilling. First time we met him, big producer, big fan of his work, and he was just sitting in it. He didn't see us enter the building actually because it was too loud. And the engineer, Evan, was there. So we sat down and he didn't even realise we were there. And he sort of sensed we were there and jumped out of his skin. But it sounded amazing. But I remember in that first meeting, I think I asked him, like, why did you say yes to work on this track or something? And he was like, well, it's a great song. But one of the things he said was the rhythm was really interesting. And he actually said it shouldn't work.
Yeah.
But it does work because he's just kind of travelling across like these toms, like a kind of. I always think of that song as being like a juggernaut of a machine that's stepping over, like, when you see the map of the world and there's like different local countries, it's like a juggernaut stepping over terrain, and it's very hard to play live.
Yes, as a result, it's
because it's the way it's like, because it's everything has to. This thing about that.
If we're talking about pulse, there's a pulse that runs through all the things.
Yeah.
but they're all kind of emphasizing it in different ways.
But it's one of those records where like the only reason the groove works is because there's about 17 elements all working at the same time.
Yeah,
To make that groove work. If you
quite
take one
reliant.
out, it doesn't. It sort of doesn't. Anyway, indulgence.
But also, there again, what's unique and helpful, I think, is like Ava's process is also she's able to just flick through examples of drum loops, and the sound may be
but
not the thing, but there's a part and a feel that she's grabbing.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if I then feed that through my kind of interpretation, then, you know, especially with Kaleidoscope.
Do you think there's a characteristic with songwriters? Do you think there's a kind of common denominator, like a thing that they all have in your experience? Because you've worked with other songwriters as well. Do you think there's a kind of... I asked Chris Potter this and other record producers that people that aren't songwriters, is there a personality trait or character trait which you recognise? And if so, what do you think that is?
I think if you're working on a songwriter's material and contributing, like a real sense of like, I think people want to feel respected because I guess they're exposing, you know what I mean, kind of letting you into this like very sort of intimate expression.
Part of themselves.
It's like, if you're going to be there, I'd like you to respect what I've done here.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's the general. And also, I do think there's a...
They need to be respected. That's the con.
Well, yeah, but
I mean,
like,
you make a good point, but it's kind of interesting.
It's, you know, not in a negative way at all. It's just like, understandably...
You're recognising the vulnerability.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It's like, you know, there's writing a song and playing it to someone else, but then there's like, okay, I'd like you to listen to what I've done.
Yeah.
And try and react to it in a way that...
Yeah, it's trusting, isn't it?
That is not ignorant to, you know,
where I'm
trying
to...
From.
Yeah.
Trying to be caring and supportive of what I've done, rather than just...
What songwriters would you like to work with?
That's an interesting...
You could pick anybody.
Interesting question.
Dead or alive?
I think, again, it's like, if they've got an inherent sense of rhythm to their music that has some push and pull to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anyone specific. I mean, one song actually I did like a lot growing up was like Vanessa Carlton, 1,000 Miles. That to me is...
Do I know that? What's that? How's that go?
I'm not even going to attempt to sing that. No.
I don't know that song.
Piano, it's like, if you hear it, you know.
Okay.
It was kind of like the 2000s pop ballad.
Okay.
But it just, that record, I love that as a record as well, because like all the musicians sound like they've got a space to have like
their own thing.
Identity in it.
Yeah.
They're not just kind of, you know, just play simple because this is about a female voice and a piano.
Yeah, they're adding...
It's like there's a band and they're... Yeah.
What are your... So we spoke about the things you're most proud of playing on, which was, I think you said, Wake of the Dawn, Wildlight, Kaleidoscope and Hits Like Effects.
Yeah.
What are your career highlights and so far, from being any career highlights in your career of like, you know, what moments have you enjoyed the most?
It's kind of interesting because I almost sometimes struggle to hold on to things like that.
Yeah.
A little bit. Like I'm always just moving along with things.
Yeah, that's good. That's good though. In the moment, in the present.
Yeah. You know, like it's like recently I'm enjoying this sort of progression into being a bit more like producing electronic sounds and maybe not playing the drums so much.
You're highlighting something here which I think is important.
Okay.
It's been important for you in terms of working with the Gravity Drive for sure, because there's been times, let me just tell you kids, on one track on the BBC Radio 2 session with Bob Harris, Ryan is wearing Ryan is like guitarists. Sorry, I don't know why I'm finding this so funny.
I'm playing a guitar flipped the wrong way round.
It's because Ryan has put up with a lot, and in some ways, and not put up with a lot, but he's been open to being kind of.
I've been challenged.
Very creative, but there was one. We got a session for Radio 2 Bob Harris, and Ryan's role was to kind of think about how to play the beats, and because we didn't want to just do acoustic, and so we didn't just want to do we wanted to have the band there. So Ryan, part of that included Ryan sort of playing pots and pans and testing different sort of vases, and then he ended up taking another guitar, turning it upside down, and putting on his fingers plectrums that you play for folk music, and he is playing a guitar upside down with plectrums on his fingers. Okay, so this cat here will go the distance, and that's. What track are you doing that on? Is
Circles, is it?
Is it Circles?
Yeah, I think so.
So if you go and want to listen to that BBC Radio 2, the Gravity Drive session with Bob Harris, Ryan is playing. Why I'm saying this is because you are dedicated to finding a creative solution.
Yeah. I like a puzzle and I keep chipping away at it until there's because it's like really in that scenario. Again, I think it's growth for me that wouldn't have come had I not.
But do you ever just think like, what the?
Oh, well, I think definitely in the first bit, I'm like, I want to hit a drum kit. It's just I was a bit.
Because
it's like that's coming from that younger time of just like, if it's not a drum kit and it's not loud, it's like it's not valid.
I think what I'm trying to highlight is that one of the things that you've been, and I think what's important to people that work with songwriters, within the boundaries of like, obviously you're not going to take your pants off, climb a tree, and sort of throw something, a conqueror. Although we might try that.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah, but it's like being creative, kind of wanting to be part of the team.
Yeah.
Not saying I am just a drummer. Being brave enough to kind of challenge yourself. I think and that's how you and also become a teammate and someone who you can rely upon.
I like the team camaraderie of. Like, yes, I played drums, but that doesn't mean. I think that's maybe important to. I feel it's important that everyone has a sense of rhythm.
Yeah.
And, it takes time maybe for non-drummers to be able to express.
Yeah.
Rhythmically.
Yeah.
Like, realising things like dance is a way of doing that.
I can be particularly.
You have an awareness for what you want.
Well, I grew up with a drummer who's a brother. I grew up with my brother being a drummer. So, I grew up with him, and he's a great drummer. So, it was kind of the first thing was always, him and me, song and drums. It was kind of... So, and through that flamenco thing, this kind of rhythm is interesting to me. But I think I can be quite kind of stubborn and a bit kind of overbearing sometimes with rhythms. Do you find that to be... not only just with me, but with other people, how do you handle that? Because it's an emotional thing.
Yeah, again, it's like there's a translation process.
Yeah.
For the way that my brain, I guess it is literally like a translator. It's like someone said something.
Yeah.
And you're then like, right, I actually need to speak it in this language now, so I can deliver that.
Yeah.
How am I gonna?
Yeah, make it work.
Yeah, but it's that definitely happens with song. It varies. I wouldn't say every songwriter is necessarily like that, but there are ones. I've had experiences where ones are like, I need to move like this.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like they're expressing something, but not quite with enough detail.
Yeah.
I guess that's my job, isn't it? In that moment, is to
Interpret.
kind of go,
Good idea, interpreter.
what is that?
Yeah,
Like, and then it's like when we get it right,
yeah,
they'll get the feeling.
yeah.
And then I know that that's the right thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. A few final questions. One of the things that you do, you've got your own YouTube channel, and I believe the term is cross-pollination.
Oh,
Yeah, apparently. I mean, everyone's got a YouTube channel these days, haven't they?
well, this is it, yeah.
But yours is, tell the fan base here about yours.
So I suppose mine is just a bit more, just, digging back to the roots of being nerdy about drums, really.
Drum Nerd channel.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, just like, because drums as an instrument, I actually do think one of the reasons why I like them so much is the fact that they are a big thing that's wrapped in a nice colour.
You do like a bit of, this is the thing, like when I first met you, it'd be fair to say that you kind of, I didn't realise that you were going to be quite as kind of aesthetically into like shiny things and sparkly things.
Yeah, absolute magpie.
Yeah, you're quite like, it's kind of quite,
it was all like, I in a way, I guess that allowed me to be a little bit flamboyant.
Okay. Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily like choose to do that other ways, but it's like, if I can
That's
get a
where
drum kit that glitters
Oh, that's cool.
and the lights bounce off it, it's like, yep,
That's great.
So that's kind of what, I'm still doing with the channel, I guess, is like, I like this drum and the way it looks.
And what's the name of the channel? Where can people find it?
I think it's just Ryan Halsey.
Halsey.
Halsey, yeah.
Brilliant. So guys and girls, if you are a drummer, if you're interested in being a drummer, if you're interested in hearing more from Ryan, please check out his YouTube channel, Ryan Halsey. Is it Ryan Halsey Drums or just Ryan Halsey?
Ryan Halsey should do it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll link to that in this episode. And on the end of each of my episodes of songwriters and producers and artists, I like to ask one question, which I'm going to ask you. Well, I ask songwriters, what song would you wish you could have written?
Mm-hmm.
And you might have an answer to that. Which song would you have written? But I was going to ask you, which song would you wish you could have played drums on?
Yeah.
So you can answer whichever question.
I think if there was a slight, I don't know, halfway house between those questions, like if there was a band that I would have loved to have been a part of, probably Incubus.
Okay.
Growing up.
Yeah.
And like for me now, I can still revisit pretty much the entire catalogue and just be like, damn.
Okay, that's cool.
And again, I think that, yeah, I guess what's interesting about that band actually is every album they've evolved.
Yeah.
And probably when I was younger, the initial albums really grabbed me because they're a lot more, they weren't really metal, but they were heavy rock, I would say. Whereas now they're a lot more, they're still a band sound.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more mellow.
Yeah.
Darker pop.
Yeah.
Leaning.
What advice would you give to a drummer? Yeah, what advice would you give to a drummer?
For what purpose do you?
Let's keep it in towards the songwriting angle. What advice would you give a drummer who is an original band or has just started out an original band? What advice would you give to them?
I think probably to not be afraid of your own ideas.
Yeah.
For fear of them not being right.
Yeah.
It's better just to put it out there, and if it's not right, it doesn't matter, because it can often inform something.
Yeah.
At least you know when it's not right.
Yeah.
That means it clears the path towards the right thing.
Nice.
But also that you don't know all the answers.
Yeah.
And I guess the more I do it, it's like actually, I think I have a lot of respect for people creating songs from a source where it's like it's gone from nothing to existing.
Right.
That's quite a fascinating thing to me, where it's like, I don't know.
Do you think you'll ever do that? Like write a song yourself? I mean, I know you've made some music.
Yeah, I hope so. I think I just, it may go there one day. I just think it's like, I find that a very agonizing process.
Okay.
Where it's when there's something in place.
That's your.
Again, I think what it does for me is it narrows things down.
Okay. I'm just going to remind. What's just come up for me is a memory of Ryan and mine. A memory of Ryan and mine, where we were at Glastonbury with the band, the Gravity Drive, and we had been there since Wednesday, and we were playing on the Saturday and Sunday, I think, for Greenpeace. And Ryan and I took it upon ourselves to go and get our kit on a Friday as people were arriving. And we kind of went to go and get it at like busy time, crosstown traffic.
Yeah, peak
People arriving. And it wasn't muddy, actually, but Ryan and I had to kind of walk a few miles to get back to the car to get our kit and carry the kit. And we had to do it twice.
I think we made the choice, didn't we? We go, we'll leave the gear in the car, we'll come back for it. But then
we had to get it on that day.
The size of the site by the time we got down to there, and then kind of going, we're going to have to go there and back to get that.
And also decided not to do it on the day of the gig. So we did it on the day before, and it was very, very busy. And it was a real, I'm telling you this, kids, because it was a moment where if you have the luck of being in a band with someone you love and enjoy being with, you can go through these little missions which galvanize and bond you in ways which you just don't have the experiences with other people in quite the same way, which is me and Ryan carrying truckloads of kit across Glastonbury whilst people are trying to walk past and trying to look after our gear for hours. And it was that kind of time in the trenches which is now and again in our relationship where there's been a moment where it's just been difficult. We've looked at each other and just gone Glastonbury, and that's kind of helped us kind of get through the next moment. So thanks, man. Thanks for today being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed talking to you and just learning a bit of how you think. And I think hopefully it's been interesting to listeners to kind of get songwriters to get and music fans to get the perspective of a brilliant drummer. So thank you very much, mate.
Oh, you're welcome. Pleasure.